Welcome to another episode of Cloud Unplugged. We have some big stories today, 3 stories, and then a secret story. Saudi Arabia is going to be the new AI future. Carbon emissions, they're going to be detected, or are being detected at the moment, from space along with nitrous oxide. But does anyone care? Find out. Nvidia robots are coming for all of our jobs as well, so watch out for that. And a random story around, we're about to find out what dolphins think of humans. So might as well crack on, Lewis. How has your week been before we get into the stories? Good?
My week has been quite good. You've tried to take me up to sort of slightly more loftier thinking, which has been good, but disruptive on the coding away. Right. I had a good weekend though, with no tech, with use of saws and drills and doing all sorts of things DIY style for the garden. So, and no vibe programming with the sun this week.
So it's a proper tech-free week.
Yeah, not less hands-on tech for sure.
Well, actually, including me in that, it's been derailing you from doing any tech work. It actually officially has been a tech-free week, basically.
Kind of has, yeah.
Oh well, never mind. We have the news around Saudi, right? Saudi Arabia, and there was a summit that's happened, and a big positioning for them to become essentially the new AI hub. So obviously they are wanting to get Saudi Arabia on the map, to be known for technology and AI, not just oil. And they have big plans on how to do that. And there's been big announcements and big amounts of money being thrown around from, well, Nvidia, Amazon, all related to obviously the sovereign wealth fund that's out there. So what are your thoughts? I have my thoughts on this and opinions on this. What are your opinions of this big announcement for Saudi Arabia to become the AI hub?
Yeah, it's kind of mixed messages. I think, from 100 feet up, there's a bit of context around how these announcements came. It's, geopolitical and with a long-term direction from Saudi. So the geopolitical aspect is, the Trump government meeting in Riyadh with the Crown Prince and working through this bunch of announcements for closer collaboration, not just in AI, across the energy sector. Old Elon, with all of his bits and all of his things he can do in Saudi, deregulate that, get in there. And then there's a whole bunch of reciprocal announcements about the Sovereign Wealth Fund investing in US data centers. So it's a bit wider, but then taking it back to your question, sorry, I couldn't resist putting my my hearings on it. And it seems perfect, AI investment in a post-oil economy. It's a great general direction, and we can dig into some of the more specific bits. But I think there's maybe a bit of hypocrisy in this space.
Hypocrisy? How? Sorry, I don't understand why. Why do you think there's hypocrisy on them being an AI hub?
So, not really on the AI hub itself, but the proposed benefits of an AI hub. So, the benefits locally would be developing AI foundation models that understand Arabic. Sorry, how do you say it? How do you say the language name? Arabic. An Arabic foundation AI models. Obviously, if they understand the language and the LLMs become fluent or are trained to be fluent, then there's benefits for local jobs, local economy, and the beneficiaries can be the population of Saudi Arabia. And obviously, post-oil, implies, a green economy, and that's the 2030 initiative that the Saudi Vision project has. So it's all positive, but the hypocrisy is the track record, the funding for all this, and the actual main customers. So the funding first is the PIF, which has got a terrible human rights record, as has the government. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch both have reports that have dug into various crackdowns on migrant workers, on indentured workers, and quite stark punishment and authoritarian practices. So I guess the hypocrisy is more how it's sold internally as benefits to the local populace versus the actual what that means to people that live in Saudi, small tribes that are moved to make room for new data centers, new building projects across the kingdom, really. And the benefits to local jobs and the economy might be offset slightly by the mass surveillance and crackdowns on LGBT rights, etc. So,
I'm not a fan with the political details of Saudi Arabia. I do know though that I think in certain places in Dubai, obviously they're quite good for people that are local in the area, especially with all the buildings and the hotels and the workers and accommodation and tax incentives and things like that. However, I guess I don't really know enough about the ins and outs of the political landscape, but I do know their fund is like massive, 3.7 trillion pounds worth in the fund, and which is like the PIF funding, which is we kind of spoke about. But then there's also they've created a VC. I don't know if the VC is created by the same fund or an arms thing, but
it's fully owned by the fund.
It is, isn't it?
Oh,
but that's like
wait a minute, different funds. You're talking about Wild.
So there's Wild, which is a VC, which is venture capital. That's just pure startups, founders doing AI. They've got 50 mil to invest there, but also are looking to invest in San Francisco too. So I guess to fund things to then consume, which would make sense, right? Go and do the funding in the States, and then also get them to use the cloud. We spoke last time in the podcast about them changing the sovereignty rights of that data. So that's like another move, which is like, actually, don't worry about the data sovereignty laws. You'll still own the data, ready for this big announcement on the data center investments that are coming. There's Nvidia that's going to be installing, obviously, their chips and the hardware for the data center for Omniverse, which will help them, I guess, for the manufacturing side of stuff and, modeling, twin modeling, a replica of all of these things to obviously work things through using Nvidia. And Amazon then is kind of upskilling and putting infrastructure in as well.
A new region, a new AI
regions,
hub.
New AI hub.
They're going to build entire infrastructure, yes.
Exactly. So they're really going for it. They're laying it all out, right? So all the path is being laid. They're thinking about all the. To be fair, they are actually thinking about all the right things, because they're like, okay, who's going to host over here if we own the data? People are obviously going to resist that. We obviously need to fix that. That's going to be. They're
certainly very, very serious, and there's big money.
Very serious.
I think there's 500 billion or something ridiculous overall in this space on this one set of AI initiatives, spread across numerous initiatives like the AWS. But there's a new separate company called HUMAIN, which is maybe a ironic name given the things I started with. But anyway, there's a HUMAIN. There's a company called HUMAIN, which is fully owned by the PIF, and has strategic initiatives with both Nvidia on a 5 billion AI project and Data Vault's Neom data center. So big investments locally in Saudi, but also reciprocal. AMD and HUMAIN building data centers up to the tune of 10 billion in the US. So is HUMAIN like concentrating on just Saudi? No, it's, you know, an AI specialist, but
Yeah,
you know,
AI specialist.
yeah, yeah, I mean, they're definitely, you know, very serious on the money. They're always serious on the money, but there are, you know, there's a context of massive, crazy projects that the Saudi government have been announcing for the last, you know, over the last 5 to 10 years. The Line probably being one of the most, and Project Neo, which is just a tech-centric, complete rebuild of the economy to not be dependent on oil. But I mean, the Line is meant to be this. They started with 100-kilometer long building for a new city that's entirely green, and then it became 1 kilometer. Now it's not going to be a kilometer, so it's being scaled back further. So maybe it's about to disappear. I have no idea. But it's, you know, they're building it and they're moving tribes away from it and getting on with it. So they are definitely serious on the money and the intent initially. Where it will go, it's early days.
Yeah, I think it's quite,
HUMAIN is brand new.
in some ways, quite smart, because economically, if you think of their trajectory, it's very, you know, they're very hotel based. There's a lot of investment in businesses. They tax incentivize you to be over there, right? So they're making loads of.
Are you talking about Dubai or Saudi Arabia? Totally different places.
Well, but even Saudi Arabia is the same, isn't it? So they're building the 1 kilometer thing. That was the whole point. So they're going to do loads of manufacturing.
That's all Saudi Arabia, yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to do loads of manufacturing and trying to get people over there, right? Trying to do tax incentives, trying to do levying on the data sovereignty. So they are maneuvering in to put their wealth to work to try and get investment in, right? So the aim is, well, if you're going to attract people over, you need to do investment. And how do we get all the investment over here? Well, we need to invest in things to get the investment over here. So we need to obviously be investing in companies that are going to be AI startups to get the investment over there and start to attract them. We need the data centers in here. So they're, I think, obviously trying to incentivize as much as possible to try and get money in Saudi Arabia.
They've got the template of Dubai in the region for how you invest and what you can invest in. And obviously the Line and projects like it, they've got huge ski resorts and mountain regions and all sorts of areas they want to reinvent. So they obviously want to get more on the international stage generally, and then all these AI related announcements to give people jobs when in a new, interesting, exciting.
Well, to make money, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, economically, it's to increase the wealth and de-risk from other economies that maybe don't have as much of a future, and are obviously being influenced maybe by, you know, others, and Trump coin and Melania coin and all the meme coins and all the other things kind of going on. You know, so there's a load of other things happening. One of the other stories is, which isn't that new because we're talking about it before, but emissions and tracking the emissions from space. So nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, methane, and the EnMap or EnMap, I guess, satellite that is like detecting through light, and the reflection back off the Earth, and then basically how it gets absorbed, so they can kind of check
spectral analysis.
Spectrum analysis, exactly. But you know, they've been talking about this. It isn't necessarily that new. There's been advancements in this space where, you know, the range of which they can detect is like very detailed now, so they get very, very precise on the emissions. Essentially start environmental mapping, but fundamentally, does anyone really care about the data? So the data comes in, you know, they can see, this pretty bad or maybe pretty good, but the data needs to inform policy. And you know, the US has been involved, China's been involved. They've been doing loads of like sharing and workshops and all of these things around this, and obviously NASA's involved, and additional satellite capabilities as well that do very similar things. However, out of all of the countries, which I think is like 120 countries, probably the main ones are going to be China and the US. And the US really, I don't think necessarily cares, because they rolled back a load of their policies. Something like 120. Doge, again, your best friend Elon, went and dismantled a lot of the environmental departments, got rid of a load of people. So what are your thoughts on this technology and actually its usage globally in the end? I guess its effectiveness on the world in the end from a technological perspective, but actually more interesting.
Yeah, from a purely technical perspective, a technological perspective on environmental monitoring from space, this has just been something that's been increasing over the decades since the first satellites. I mean, environmental monitoring from space using spectroscopy has started in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It's just with the shrinking electronics and more launch capabilities, there's a lot more capability, and indeed I think the actual study, one of the studies that were cited in this EnMap reports were talking about the volume of data and how wide it is and how real time it is. It's completely current and can be used to enforce local policies by governments or by scientists doing climate studies. So technologically, I think it's just a continued increase in capabilities. Basically, we're almost Star Trek now. Scan the planet for life forms. Beep, blah, 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 job done. So we're at that sort of increased capability stage. It's exciting from a scientific and
from scientific, I think it's in really, really positive, but from a political standpoint, and also not just that, but also an information age where people just basically rebuke anything that's said anyway. Oh yeah, those stats are nonsense anyway. I've got another data source where apparently it's these emissions, and actually you're talking nonsense. It's bullshit. And actually these satellites, actually EnMap satellites, that's absolute bollocks anyway. We know what happens, and then it just goes on, and everyone's like, yeah, let's do nothing.
I think there's some optics, certainly geopolitically. I mean, US seems almost schizophrenic in, well, maybe their great leader is slightly, it's definitely phrased in the one hand, we're going to do all these amazing things, the best that's ever been, and then on the other hand, completely dismantle all the things that we're doing. They don't necessarily add up. On the one hand you say this, and on the other hand you do that. It's so I think there's a moment of pause with complete dismantlement. Quite a lot of the NASA funding has been, it's fantastic thinking, well, let's remove some of the crazy bureaucracies on the SLS system, but let's remove some of the climate modeling and science programs. And a large part of NASA's budget was towards with climate monitoring and satellites in this monitoring space. So that's obviously very worrying, but I think kind of with a pinch of salt, because scientists doing science, as long as they're funded, I suppose is the issue.
I think that is the issue.
They are doing the right science, and the scientific capability is moving forward. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess your point is, if they're not funded, then they can't have a job. So although lots of people are interested in doing the right thing and the capabilities there, who's going to fund them? Yeah, I think there's a few countries, and I think
it's not just the funding.
China.
A lot of this comes from universities anyway. So even the universities are getting attacked in the States, right? So I think there's quite a lot of pincering going on, maybe for different reasons, and it's just it's not like some strategy. It's just a bit chaotic, and just so happens to have there's a lot of symbiotic relationships between everything, like how things work through the investment in science inside the university that's invested, for certain reasons that progresses things, globally, from advancements versus, the policies and people reporting on the policies. But one thing I will say is that you don't hear about the actual data. So I couldn't tell you. I mean, I probably could have done more research. It's probably me, but I couldn't tell you actually statistically what it actually means globally from these emissions and the predictions that they've come up with. And I probably wouldn't spend the time personally, obviously, with everything else competing, as most people would, unless you're really interested in it, digging into the research and all of the data. Somebody needs to be communicating and simplifying the information, and that isn't really happening. Well, it might be, but I'm not privy necessarily. Yeah, it's not it clearly, and I bet I could ask quite a lot of people and ask them, and I don't think they'd know. Which means it's not mainstream.
You're absolutely right. But I guess what actually affects outcomes is the local policies and politics around that and the optics. And there has actually been, ironically, there's been some really foul noises coming out of the UK government, but there's also been some positive things about environmental monitoring and testing of policy to see that the outcomes are actually met. I think China, as you cited, have domestic policies around reducing emissions, and using this technology means there's actual, real, measurable, outcomes on pollution and public health, which I think are really positive things. And I guess we've just got to see how regimes change and which are the good ones, which are actually benefiting their people. And, I don't know, if democracy holds, then maybe.
Well, I guess can't really say China and democracy, but I mean,
no, I'm saying in the States, if democracy holds, then maybe things can get better and policies can align. But you're right. It's weird. It's not one type, because obviously China, not being a democracy, seems to be absolutely crushing it in the environmental stakes.
Yeah, I think they position themselves,
knowing how clean the air is.
Yeah, they've positioned themselves on their big plan, because they've got more 10-year plans, don't they, in China? So, and as it is a big, you need to have a 10+ year plan for climate change. So in some ways, democracies that will change parties all the time for a problem that is not a 3 or 4 year endeavor, obviously is problematic in itself. With a democracy, it's like, how does anyone get a chance to fix something that's going to take more than 4 years? And then you could potentially keep switching the party every 4 years and never really address the problem, because you keep changing the approach constantly. So could argue democracies aren't really suitable for big global long-term challenges. Who knows? Anyway, let's go to China, Lewis, quick. Well, you were in China not that long ago.
I was. Yeah, it was very green, very clean. Lots of electric cars, electric scooters, electric motorbikes, electric buses. It was all very, you could smell it. So maybe their policies are already working.
Yeah. What is your moving on then away from that, the GR00T N1, which is to explain for people. So Nvidia have launched a AI model, like a foundation model, that's trained on human, I guess, behavior, generally how they walk and move. And they've released it, and it's open source. So, their first open source human movements, basically synthetic data trained model. And they've based it on, did you ever, have you ever read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman?
No, I think you've mentioned it to me before.
Yeah, so there's a book. I think it's only, but you might be able to listen to it Audible or something. But he did a great book on basically the two systems that humans have. The system one where you don't really have to think, because it's quick for your brain. So lizard style innate behaviors. Things like you can say like 1 + 1, you'll know the answer's 2. You don't think about it, right?
Properly learned or trained.
Just trained, yeah. So, and then there's things where you'll be like 25 times 3,624, right? You'll be like, oh my God, I don't know. I've got to really think and engage a different system, which is now actually the pragmatic thinking system to calculate things and work out the answer. And so his book is based on a system 1 and system 2. And it then also, which just not to go on too much about the book, but it also looks at the psychology, because that's kind of the premise of the book, which is how your behaviors around each system have different trust models. So you'll trust more your innate, so things you can see. And they did an experiment on, I believe, a basketball match where the ball's being passed, and they made people watch, and they'd be like, right, the people in the black shirts count how many times the basketball gets passed. So then you're focusing and like counting, and then somebody in a gorilla outfit runs across the pitch, right? And because they're concentrating, they don't notice. And then they interview them saying, you know, did you see the gorilla? And obviously, because they have such trust in system 1, they thought the person was lying. Like, they wouldn't believe that they couldn't acknowledge a gorilla running across, you know, the pitch. And so you end up basically refuting facts because of the trust system built on things that are just innate, right? So
how does this relate to Groot? just you know,
just
out of interest.
Totally not related. I did say unrelated about the book. Yeah, I did caveat that. But anyway, it's been trained. They have a system 1 and a system 2 in the training on the synthetic data, and actually they have done a very similar thing, which is language and reasoning and understanding. So they've got system 2 and they've got system 1, which is obviously reflex. And so, you know, if you're trying to work out a path and a route, right, so through a complicated forest, then you might have to think about, okay, what's the direction I need to go in, versus if I'm just going up step by step, you know, it's a little bit more on the system 1, or 1 foot in front of the other. So they're very different interactions that your brain, and they've done them in a very similar way, where they've obviously trained the model. So it's actually based on system 1 and system 2 for the new rise up of these humanoid AI robots, these humanoid robots that are basically coming for everyone's jobs. So
yeah, I think it's fascinating. The Nvidia announcement over their open sourcing their model, but also how it was trained, how it foundational, how it's uses synthetic data based on simulating things in a sped up universe, because to do physical training of real robots is obviously very expensive, but to do simulated training of simulated robots in simulated reality, you can run it many times and you can repeat the experiments very fast. So you can get a lot more innate system 1 instant behavior, which is required in robotics for immediacy. Understanding your environment and catching a ball or balancing or dancing and not moving robotically means system 1, you know, absolutely. And then system 2 for planning and working things out. But system 1 is absolutely required for balance and reasoning and dancing and just moving naturally and being able to use
things
tools
you don't think about at all.
Yeah,
your body just does it. I mean,
and the fascinating thing is the it's not just Nvidia's like model. It's great that they want to enter this space, but actually across the humanoid robot space. I mean, the Boston Dynamics latest robot, you know, they've showed them doing all sorts of parkour and things, but their latest humanoid robot using synthetic data training shows a very natural movement. And just a couple of days ago, the latest Tesla robot dancing, showing it's moving very, very fast and dynamically, and all of the Chinese robot manufacturers have shown very similar things based on entirely synthetic training data. So they've been able to completely train them about the real world using models that closely resemble the real control systems of a robot, and then take them to the real world and prove that they can really do those things So it's been a long arc of getting the data, getting the simulations good enough, because actually getting the pipeline for training is a bigger job than, well, we've got robot and got models, but they're crap, and training them with humans, teleoperation or whatever, is going to be extortionately slow, excruciatingly slow. So training with synthetic data in models like this, I guess this is about democratizing training of robots using
Well, I think
Nvidia,
if we strip it,
Omniverse, and models.
but if we strip it back on what it means to Nvidia, first you just said, so I guess number one, they've got the Omniverse platform, like you know, that they can leverage for these simulations to train on in a simulated world. So they've already got an advantage there. And then two, the potential market for, you know, humanoid robots is insanely massive, right? That market potential is,
even if they're just walking
huge.
dogs, it's massive.
Well, not the walking dogs.
But if they can move naturally in the space, and even if they're just carrying your luggage as a porter, they don't need to have too much system 2. They don't need to be.
Would you then,
like,
sorry, just
crazy
just
high brained?
because the fact that you just said
do labor.
A walking dog, does that mean if you could get a robotic dog that was just like a dog but without all of the food?
Oh no! I was saying a humanoid robot walking a dog. But if you want robots walking robots, you could do that. Yeah.
Oh, you were talking about a human walking a dog.
No, a human robot. One of its earliest jobs could be walking a dog, right?
Oh, I see. Right, you didn't mean a robotic dog.
No,
because they are robotic dogs.
They are quite famously lots of robotic dogs. So
right, okay.
Let's just close that loop and get them all.
But worryingly, would I trust? I mean, you mentioned Tesla. Would I trust a megalomaniac, you know, individual who has insane wealth and power with like humanoid robotic system? I mean, you know, it does make the God. What was that film with the Teslas where the Teslas actually get all taken over, and it just feels like starts off as a film or a Black Mirror episode and starts to become reality, doesn't it?
A lot of sci-fi in this space that has already covered the topic, but yeah, feels closer.
Sure. But I think it's going to be really good. The only caveat for this, again, geopolitically, that I do have a bit of beef with is the states when they're saying, you know, put the tariffs on, stop outsourcing manufacturing, you know, stop basically building things overseas for cheaper, you know, and disincentivize you basically importing goods and actually start to manufacture in the States. We need to give people jobs, the working class, their jobs back. But then if it's all robotics anyway, there is no working class job. So really all you're doing is incentivizing manufacturing, but probably with a plan to be more robotic based. And I'm sure Elon's in the ear saying, look, we can manufacture all this much cheaper anyway if we could start having all these robotics. But under the guise of pretending that it's for the people inside the states to get jobs back, which people don't want to do manufacturing jobs anyway. Culturally, it's, you know, probably moved on a bit, but it's a double-edged sword. What can provide amazing sociological benefits for caring, for, you know, help of in healthcare settings and for the disadvantaged, and to remove manual labor and dangerous labor and start to give people a focus on working directly with other human beings using the skills system 2 and things where you reason about people's well-being and care and like actual companionship. But do you not think that's insane? Maybe that's insane to me. It's like you've got a population that's exponentially grown, and you're then saying, do you know what we don't have is people to look after people. So what we need right now, even though we've got like an insane population like growth from previous hundreds of years, we need robots. That's what we need. We need robots that can look after people. It's like, honestly, we don't. We actually don't. We actually have enough of a population, and there should be community incentives.
I think you're right. But
it's like we don't need robots.
If there's one benefit, like it's, you know, refocus what people should be doing, and we should be spending more time with each other and families and the elderly, and have more of a cohesive society, and get all the drudgery done for us, you know. And if that means a bit of robots, maybe we do. Don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
Complex.
I'm not for robots necessarily, but I do feel like it's a slippery downward spiral.
I mean, I
Where,
mentioned the film iRobot. What could go
well,
wrong?
not even iRobot. I just think though, I mean, you've got DoorDash and Deliveroo and Uber Eats, and you've got bikes that are electric. You don't even have to pedal anymore, and it's like, at what point you're not cooking, you're not walking, you're not cycling, you're not, your AI's doing your thinking for you. I mean, what are you even doing? Like, what are you even actually doing
Well,
in the end?
the story, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I think the 3rd episode was about dolphins being the clever ones and us being the thickos. So maybe we are. That's a segue.
Well, we'll find out.
Get
That
it?
was a really good segue. Wow. Honestly, I'm actually quite impressed.
Yeah.
That was
There we
a
go.
really good segue.
System 2 thinking there.
That
for
was
sure.
pure System 2 thinking. That no robot would do that.
No,
It
never.
could never do that. That was too advanced. Okay, well, segue. You've stolen the show there, so you should segue then.
I can. Yeah, I mean, Dolphin Gemma is the story.
And who's she?
Gemma, she's the sister of Gemini,
Right.
who's like another AI. Actually, you phrase this. But you've got the initial thing, and then I'll leap on in.
Yeah. So they've Google. I mean, fine. I mean, you did the segue. It feels like I'm cheating, but Google partnered with some marine biologists for the Google Gemma, which is basically an AI model trained on dolphin. I guess, can you say speech? It feels like something I don't know why. It feels very human in language, but I suppose. I mean,
Sorry, just talking dolphin. Do you not understand?
It is, honestly, I did, because Google Gemma's on my phone. I literally did understand everything you just said. And honestly, Lewis, I totally agree. I totally agree with everything you just said. Yeah, so they're basically being trained on their, I guess, vocalizations, the pitches and the noises, and to then try and turn it into a language model, and then try and decipher, I guess, the communication that's happening to interpret dolphin.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, the model,
insane. Yeah,
the Dolphin Gemma model I read is a tiny model, and it's like an LLM but trained on acoustic sound as the token space. It's not trained on ASCII first, I guess, on character space. It's trained on an audio representation. They've had to work out how to get the salient bits of the audio into their model, and it's predicting the next audio noise that would go with it. So they've done decades of research in this space, and there's an enormous amount of data. But the problem is, well, how do you distill that data down into something actionable where you can then use it in your research? So what they've done is made this Dolphin Gemma model, which is relatively small because the foundation isn't the whole internet, because the internet isn't written in Dolphin, weirdly. It's just the researchers' recordings, and they've been able to distill that, given the correlations that they've really been hard won over many decades of what's a name and what's a more nuanced meaning verb or now, or which bits of vocabulary can we discern from decades of research, and then once we've got that, can we predict anything from it? And they've got this model which is only a few 100 million parameters, which is tiny in relation to the 8 billion tiny models that will run on your desktop, and the 30, 50 to 100 billion parameter models that are used in language these days. So these ones can run on a phone, which is the interesting thing.
But I mean, two things. Why the fuck would you call it Dolphin Gemma? Honestly, I mean that is a bit crazy.
Dolphin
that is
Gemma.
Honestly, you should have called it a better name. But
shall I tell you why?
Oh, go on then. Oh yeah, yeah. Right. Ah,
There you
I
go.
see.
Not
Okay,
quite.
that does make sense.
Good.
The second thing is I don't think they've got much to talk about. Like, I generally don't think dolphins really have that much going on, generally speaking, to have an
Would
extensive
would
vocabulary
it not
anyway.
be
So
would it not be fascinating as a scientist, working with marine biology in that setting of that species, dolphins, working with this data to actually make breakthroughs where they can respond and get reactions and start to learn or decipher or have any type of empathy at all with another intelligent to a degree, for sure. I mean, the flippers are a little bit of a shame. We've got these opposable thumbs, but the flippers thing, I mean, they haven't progressed their society in lots of ways. But as you were just saying, do we really need robots? Should we be spending more time with each other? Maybe the dolphins have got it all sorted.
yeah, but maybe we're about to interfere in something we shouldn't really be interfering in.
Maybe we'll learn something.
Oh,
Come
maybe
on,
we will learn something, yeah. But it does
from the
feel like
dolphins.
one of these things that could be. I mean, I think it's amazing because of just the idea of being able to actually interpret dolphin and also potentially speak dolphin. Whether people, I mean, you can speak fluent dolphin. So
Yeah,
whether
hold your
it
phone up
furthers,
again, and I'll demonstrate
I
further.
mean, I do feel like I believe. I mean, having interpreted everything you've said
Enough
so far,
already, Lewis. Stop
yeah,
with the
I
flicking
do
dolphin.
believe. But yeah, it just reminds me of those things where because people already know quite a lot, I imagine, the marine biologists about dolphins because they've researched them for so long, that it just becomes probably like quite obvious that those were the things that they were kind of saying. A bit like a Garmin watch when you like people wake up and they're like, have to look at their watch to see if they're tired and got a good sleep or like, oh God, I wonder how many steps I've done. It's like, well, you either walked a lot or you didn't. I mean, one way or another, you should know these things. You don't need the watch to inform the decisions you've already made. So I do find those things quite funny. Obviously, I am a bit pro watch. So I kind of get it anyway. I'm just being facetious, but it does matter that you just find out that yeah. I suppose that was what we thought. Yeah, they were the things I thought they would be saying. Based on all of the research that we've been doing. But yeah, it's super, super interesting. I do like that idea of speaking.
We're in a very interesting time where we're speaking with machines and maybe dolphins, and there's more than one intelligence, or at least
Yeah,
on the
100%,
spectrum, thing
100%.
going on, and then there never has been before in human civilization.
Yeah,
So
it
it's
is. It
cool
is
times.
massive progress. Yeah, absolutely. Well, they are the stories for this week. I've got to go to Saudi. Are you coming along with me, Lewis? We need to get on our flight and do some modelling on the new AI hub.
Maybe.
I need to get you translated. Maybe teach you a bit of whale
Yeah,
whilst we're over
we
there. Yeah.
could do that.
All right, let's do it. All right. Well, nice speaking to everybody, and I shall see everyone soon. Adios.
Adios. Or should I?